Ivy here. This year I read almost all of Marissa Meyer's books. I'm pretty sure I've never read a Marissa Meyer book before this year. I thought it would be fun to do a video where we talk about all of Marissa Meyer's books that I've read this year and let you know what I thought of them. So we'll talk about them in order of how I read them, starting with Heartless. Heartless got me out of a major reading slump this summer, and I haven't been able to put down Marissa Meyer's book since then. Heartless is kind of like a prequel to Alice in Wonderland. It's about how the Queen of Hearts became the Queen of Hearts. And it's about Catherine, who loves to bake with her friend Marianne, and the King of Hearts is very interested in her, and she is not interested in him, but she is interested in his court jester, whose name is Jest. And her and Jest begin a sort of secret courtship, and you'll just have to read it to find out what happens next, because it's really fun and it's beautifully written, and I just really enjoyed it. The next bit of Marissa Meyer's work that I read was the Lunar Chronicles, starting with Cinder, which is about it's a Cinderella retelling about a cyborg gifted mechanic named Cinder, who is growing up in New Beijing. It's very futuristic, and it is just like this magical, futuristic, kind of bordering on science fiction, fairy tale retelling, and it's really fun. The second book in the Lunar Chronicles is called Scarlet. It is a Red Riding Hood retelling. It is very fun. It takes place in the exact same world that Cinder took place in, and continues Cinder's story while also telling the story of Scarlet Benoit, who is a French character, and her grandmother goes missing, and she teams up with a man named Wolf, who is a street fighter, and they go in search of her grandmother, and it is very fun and very exciting, and I loved it a lot. The third book in the Lunar Chronicles is called Cress. It is a Rapunzel retelling, and I don't want to tell you too much about it because it will spoil the first two books, but basically the characters that we've met in the first two books of the Lunar Chronicles are continuing their adventure, and Cress is now along for the ride because she has been imprisoned on a satellite since her childhood, and she can help them to accomplish their mission. The fourth book in the Lunar Chronicles is called Winter, and it is a Snow White retelling about a princess who has an evil stepmother who is the main villain of the Lunar Chronicles. Her name is Queen Lavanna, and Winter is the Snow White kind of figure, and it's a beautiful continuation of the series while still focusing on the main characters from the previous story, but also focusing on Winter's perspective. And it's a really good balance. There's a lot of characters going on, but Marissa Meyer managed to keep them all going and keep all of their stories relevant and their character development continuing, and I really loved that. The next Lunar Chronicles book that I read was Stars Above, which is number 4.5. It's a combination of a bunch of short stories that take place in the world of the Lunar Chronicles, and I really enjoyed the short story, and I felt like they were good for building the world and also exploring some of the pasts of the characters without taking away from the story at all. It was kind of like flashbacks, and I don't know, it was just really well done. The next Lunar Chronicles book that I read was called Fairest, and it's about Queen Lavanna, who is like the evil queen character in the Lunar Chronicles. And it takes place between Cress and Winter, but I read it after I had read the entire rest of the series. And I think you could potentially read it as number 3.5 as it was intended, but I felt like going back and reading it after finishing the series was very helpful to me, because I didn't want to have an understanding of Lavanna until the story was over. I wanted to hate her because she was the villain. So empathizing with her a little bit from some of the things that you learn about her, while still recognizing her as a villain and still recognizing that she's evil, that is what Fairest did for me, was that it was a really good balance of explaining some of her actions without justifying her actions, and I really liked that. I thought it was a really nuanced look at an evil character. So I definitely loved Fairest. I think it might have actually been my favorite of the Lunar Chronicles because it was just such an interesting look at a villainous character. So after I finished the Lunar Chronicles, I read some other things for a little while, but then Gilded came out. Gilded by Marissa Meyer is also a fairy tale retelling. It is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, and this is my favorite Marissa Meyer book. It's why it's the only one that I own a physical copy of. It's just so fun and magical, and there's something really dark about it, but also it's really got a whimsical feeling as well. Gilded is about a poor miller's daughter who has a talent for spinning tales because the god of lies has given her a gift. And so she's a storyteller. Her name is Cerilda. She tells one of her stories to the Earl King, and the story is that she can spin straw into gold. And so he takes her to his castle, and that's where she meets Gild, who is the Rumpelstiltskin kind of figure in the story. And he is able to spin the straw into gold for her, and it kind of begins a romance between the two of them. But I'm not going to tell you too much more about this one. You really should read it. It was a fantastic read. It really is my favorite of Marissa Meyer's books. It is a duology, and I am really excited for the second book because I loved this book so much. This is actually one of my favorite reads this entire year, and I will go more into this book in my end of year wrap up of my favorite books, but I definitely recommend this one. It's so good. The next series by Marissa Meyer that I read was the Renegades trilogy, which is a story about superheroes and supervillains. The Renegades are the superheroes, and the anarchists are the supervillains, and they're all just these prodigies, or people with extraordinary abilities, and they are on opposite teams, and they are fighting one another for kind of control of the city. But for a long time, the Renegades have been in control, and the anarchists have been trying to rebuild after they had a devastating loss. And the main character is Nova, and she has more reason to hate the Renegades than most people because her family was murdered and the Renegades didn't show up to help. And her uncle is the leader of the anarchists. And she decides to infiltrate the Renegades' headquarters as a renegade and try and use their system, essentially, in order to gain power for the anarchists and be able to get the anarchists back on the top, I guess. And that's what this series is about, and I can't really tell you too much about the sequels because it will spoil the first book, but it was such a good series. The first book is Renegades, the second book is called Arch Enemies, and the third book is called Supernova. And the characters were so easy to love, and you had so many dynamic relationships and so much character growth for all of the characters, and it was just such a fun series. I adored it. The last book by Marissa Meyer that I read was called Instant Karma, which I would classify as kind of like a romantic comedy. There's some irony in it and a lot of comedic relief. The main character's name is Prue, and she has a lab partner named Quint who she sees as very lazy and very rude, and she's an overachiever. She's very ambitious, and that can make her somewhat judgmental of the people in her little coastal town. And so she wakes up one day with the power to cause instant karma on the people around her. And for some reason, whenever she tries to use that on Quint, her lab partner, it always backfires. This story is so fun and so well written. I loved the aspects of like environmental protection and especially with regards to taking care of marine life. And there were aspects of this story that were just like a very classic miscommunication turned romance. And I love that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love Jane Austen's books so much, because Jane Austen is like the queen of that dramatic irony, of that miscommunications leading to drama that eventually leads to romance. And that's very much the story that is in Instant Karma, without it being over dramatic or without it being dark at all. It's very lighthearted and just a very fun read. It was so enjoyable, and it's one that I would definitely recommend to people who are looking for something a little bit more lighthearted and who are looking for something where there's a lot of character development. Instant Karma is probably the best one for you. So the only Marissa Meyer books that I wasn't able to get my hands on this year were the anthologies and her graphic novels. The Wires and Nerve graphic novels, which take place in the Lunar Chronicles, I believe, I couldn't get my hands on them. I tried to get them from the library, and they only had volume 2 and not volume 1 at my local library, and that was very frustrating. And so I haven't gotten a chance to read them yet, but I'm hoping to get them soon so that I can read them. So that might be something that I read next year. Then of course there's Marissa Meyer's anthologies. There is Serendipity, Because You Love to Hate Me, and A Tyranny of Petticoats. And I haven't gotten to any of those, but I do plan on reading those as well, just because I love Marissa Meyer's work so much now. I'm such a big fan, and I just recently became a fan, which is so fun. And that's one of my favorite things about books, is that they have such a long shelf life. You know, they can be read when they first come out, and then they can be read again later, or for the first time later. And I'm just so excited that I got to read her books this year, because they were so fantastic, and I rated them all very high, and I loved them so much. And I definitely recommend Marissa Meyer's books. If you've never read a Marissa Meyer book, definitely start with one of them. I recommend you start with Gilded because it's my favorite, but like I said, Heartless is what got me started in her books, and the Lunar Chronicles are one of her earlier series. And if you like that kind of romantic comedy sort of thing, maybe you start with Instant Karma. So it really just depends on what type of story you love to read. If you love to read fairy tale retellings, then maybe the Lunar Chronicles is a good place to start. Maybe Gilded is a good place to start. If you like the idea of a prequel to Alice in Wonderland, then maybe Heartless is a good place to start. But if you're more on the side of like the romantic comedy or the superheroes versus supervillain story, then you would want to do Instant Karma or the Renegades. I really loved everything that I read by her, so I definitely recommend all of it. If there are books by her that I didn't mention in this, or that I didn't get to read this year that you have read and that you recommend, please comment below and tell me what you think, or comment and tell me what you think of the books by her that you have read, even if they are ones that I mentioned in this. I would love to hear what you have to say about her work. I'm a big fan of hers, and I would love to meet other people who are also big fans of hers. So if you have read her works, please let me know. And if you haven't, definitely give it a shot and let me know which book you're gonna start with, because I'm so interested. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. Hit the bell, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!